Thank you very much to both. Let's move to the discussion, and if I may ask to the two of you to reply very briefly, so it will help the conversation cover more ground. I'll start by stepping back a little bit from the detailed argument and put the same question to the two of you. For what you know or what you guess, who is actually behind these proposed changes? Is it the chief executive, Carrie Lam herself, as she claims, or is it actually Beijing? Mr. Tong, can I ask your view on this?
Well, first of all, sorry, although I'm an EXCO member, I can't divulge confidential information, but I believe the request came from Carrie, and the government has spent a lot of time trying to convince Beijing to agree. But can I just take this opportunity just to point out that, I expect Dennis to say what he said, but there are a number of things which are not factual. Carrie Lam, under the ordinance or under the amendment, has no power to exercise other than to initiate the process and to veto if the court were to agree to extradite, to veto, not to order extradition. No, the law says specifically that there should be a separate full trial where the court would receive evidence relating to whether or not the prisoner can receive a fair trial. So contrary to what he tells you is not correct. In relation to the committal of the criminal offense itself, yes, we treat it as if the committal is that of Hong Kong. But there would be a separate trial with full evidence, as in the case of Lord Advocate against Dean, if it relates to the human rights of that person. Thirdly, there is a provision which deals with human rights nature or the need for a fair trial. I just quoted chapter and verse in the section. In fact, section 5, which is a section where all the safeguards are, makes it very plain that it is different from the criminal aspect of the extradition request. It deals with certain criteria which, if not met, the law would not be applicable in the sense that you cannot extradite anybody. So again, I'm sorry, that's factually wrong. Now, I think there are many other minor inaccuracies which I can't, within the time available to me, to enumerate each and every one of you. But I do urge you, don't believe Ronnie Tong. Don't believe me. Go and read the ordinance. Go and read the UN treaty. Read the model treaty. Oh, by the way, there's one other thing I must mention. Dennis mentioned about not needing authorization from the relevant requesting country. That, in fact, is Article 7 of the model treaty. That, in fact, is what the UN said, that you do not waste time on criminal aspect by asking for authorization. That matter can be dealt with when you look at the criminal nature or the criminal aspect of the request. What is most important, which is at the uppermost mind of the UN, is to safeguard the human rights aspect, which is an entirely different part of the exercise. And it's an entirely different part of the regime. So you've got to understand that.
Thank you. Can you briefly reply to my initial question, please?
To your initial question, answers I don't know whether it's from Carrie or Beijing. I don't know. I'm not in the government. And also, to talk about factual accuracies, I think a lot of the countries that Ronnie actually mentioned in her PowerPoint are countries where they have criminal assistance agreements with UK and the US, but not extradition.
Sorry.
I'm
Dennis,
sorry. But
please be factual. First of all, what I mentioned in my PowerPoint is what is in the law in Hong Kong. Secondly, in UK, they have a provision to deal with ad hoc cases.
That, Ronnie. Can you not cut into my time?
And the case of Lord Advocate against Dean is a very example of the exercise of jurisdiction under the ad hoc provision, which is what the Hong Kong government now is trying to emulate.
I'm talking about countries where they may have extradition agreements. There are, of course, countries who do have extradition agreements with China. But I just pointed out in my speech that countries who we call civilized democratic countries like France, Spain, and Portugal have an express condition where they say they do not extradite their own citizens to face trial in China. And that's a fact, and it is, you can go check it. And a lot of the countries that you mentioned have mutual criminal assistance arrangements with China, but not extradition.
Again, that's an inaccuracy.
I think we want to...
Look, can I just point out this? I'm sorry, I cannot stand people giving out untruths, okay? I cannot stand it. Now,
then how do you stand being in the Executive Council?
It is in fact within the model treaty that every country must reserve to itself a right to veto extradition on the basis that its national is being involved. In fact, if you look at every single bilateral treaty, every single law on extradition, you will find that there is a provision there saying that if it involves your own national, then you don't need to give any reason to refuse extradition. We have the same provision in Hong Kong. Now, the only problem with that is that it was enacted, as I reminded you, before the handover. So that provision at the moment reads that the chief executive is entitled to veto the extradition on the ground that the person requested is of Chinese nationality. Right? Now, but if the request comes from mainland, how does it work? Well, I've already mentioned on another occasion that we can look into that. And if you're saying, well, let's put in Hong Kong permanent resident so that the CE has got a full veto power without giving any reasons whatsoever to refuse extradition, not order extradition. Well, let's have that debate, right? The fact that you have a provision that you do not extradite your own national, I'm sorry, it's not designed for the purpose of China. It is there from day one for everybody.
Okay, if we could...
When you look at statements that has been made by not only U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but other international chambers of commerce in Hong Kong, who rarely speak out on these matters, and also local business community. The local business community, my colleagues who represent the business sectors in electrical tell me that they are having trouble understanding why these proposals are being put forward. They didn't know about it, and they were very concerned about it. They went into talks with the government right away, and then the government caved in by saying, okay, fine, you're the business community, let's exempt a whole series of white-collar crimes. And I think that is even worse. The government is saying, okay, for these people, they're business people, they're rich and powerful people, let's give them an exemption. They're concerned about white-collar crimes. What about the ordinary Hong Kong people? Ronnie said he doesn't understand the booksellers. Well, I'll tell you what you don't understand, Ronnie. If you have been abducted by authorities, taken across the border, incarcerated, away from your friends and your families, have charges laid against you, I think you'll be afraid too. I think it is not hard to understand the booksellers and their concerns. I think it actually is disingenuous to say that you don't understand people who has been incarcerated and face unfair situations like that. That sense of injustice is exactly how universal human rights are.
There is a lot of room for improvement in how to initiate this proposal to amend, in explaining to the public what does it involve. I have been in constant touch with John Lee, Secretary for Security, and every time I talk to him, I said, oh, why don't you go and explain more? And then he said, well, Ronnie, I explained at every opportunity that I had. I speak to all the press, but...
Would he come to the FCC?
Sorry?
Can you invite him to the FCC?
Well, if you invite him, I don't know.
Yeah, he is invited. This is official.
But what he's saying is that, look, Ronnie, after I've spoken to the press, I don't even get a mention in the paper. But the fact that you said something, it was a headline. So I say, are you simply relying on me? I mean, that's not fair. as I said, I don't represent the government. I'm merely here as a lawyer to explain my point of view, and I emphasize it's my point of view, right? You may think that it's very biased, it's very unfair, but it's my point of view, and I'm to be supported by facts, supported by legal principles, and supported by the UN. I'm sorry, right? But I think the government needs to do more. Yes, I think there is room for improvement for the amendment. As I say, let's bring back the discussion to a rational basis. If you say, look, there are areas which we can bolster up our protection of the human rights, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's discuss that. All right? But I hope you understand, me being an EXCO member, I'm not here to wave banners and say, look, you must amend this, that, and the other. I mean, that would be wholly inconsistent with my position as an EXCO member. But I have already given out very, very strong hints on one of the televisions in Hong Kong on Sunday. I've already spoken. I said, look, these are the areas that you can look into to see how you can improve the amendment. So let's work on that. Let's have a rational debate instead of taking a personal attack on me. It wouldn't get to the government because I don't represent the government. All right? Sure. So, I'm sorry, one final thing. There is still time to go. The Taiwan case is one case. But there are many, many other cases out there. The only way, I firmly believe that the only way in which Hong Kong can persevere and continue the one country, two systems beyond 2047 is to make us a world city, a true world city, not the backwaters in criminal matters of Asia. So if we can bolster our system, we can work on many, many other Taiwan cases. But if you give up at this point of time, and this is perhaps the most opportune point of time, then you never get done. I have been waiting for this for 20 years when I was chairman. One of the first things I did was to tell the Hong Kong government, I said, this is ridiculous. You have bilateral extradition agreements with other countries, but not with your own country, where we have the most intimate relationship, where people are crossing border every day, every minute, every second. And do you know how many serious criminals are there in Hong Kong from China? I'm told it's in the number of tens, a number of tens, 30-something. And these are real criminals, not booksellers.
Thank you very much. For journalists, how do you assess them? Say I interview someone that Chinese authorities do not approve of, or I invite someone at the FCC that Chinese authorities do not approve of. It's not a crime under Hong Kong law. It is a crime somehow under Chinese law. Are we at risk or not?
As I say, you cannot be prejudiced by opinion, by your opinion. So, I'm sorry, members of the press has a lot of their own opinion, apart from reporting facts. So, they, by definition, are exempt from the statute. But don't ask for specific exemption. I think that's wrong. I agree with Dennis that it's wholly wrong to accept white-collar crimes because they can do so much damage to a civilized community, particularly, a financial center like Hong Kong. So I disagree with the government's agreement to accept the business sector, right?
But you're basically saying that there won't be anything like opinion crimes
Well, it's written specifically in the law, and if you say that our judges can't read English, then I'm sorry, I just don't want to accept it. The law tells them that if it involves opinion, whether in the charge or in the person involved, then the law doesn't apply.
Okay, Dennis, can you reply?
Very quickly, just in case any of you are out of town, Hong Kong is not a criminal backwaters or full of criminals everywhere. Hong Kong actually has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. It's one of the safest cities in the world. So just, in case you were wondering that we've got criminals looming everywhere. Secondly, I want to say that, of course, Ronnie is right that if they go after you for a political a related opinion or religious opinion, of course the courts will throw it out within 5 seconds. I have no question about that. So if you're worried about them coming after you as a journalist for what you're reporting, then you have nothing to worry about. I tell the same thing to people who run NGOs or civil society, that they have nothing to worry about as far as that's concerned. But I don't think I'm the only one who is not naive enough to think that the Chinese government can and has a history of going after people using any other crime. They could weaponize the system the same way they've weaponized their own system against their own citizens. What was Ai Weiwei arrested and convicted for? Not for his artwork or his political opinion, for tax evasion. If journalists go in and out of China every day for their work, they have a lot of contacts, a lot of activities in mainland China. Would any of that be used against them and weaponized against them because of what they wrote? Of course they don't have to go after you for a politically related offense. They wouldn't be that stupid. They could and can weaponize it. I think that is the fear.
But again, there is this requirement of double criminality. Whatever you are accused of doing, you've got to test it against the provision which says that if that were to happen in Hong Kong, does it constitute one of the specified serious crimes?
Yeah.
If it doesn't fit in, then again the law doesn't apply.